Thanks, Helen. Thanks, Helen. Right, let's see if I can do this. Share my screen. Yeah, can you see that okay?
Yeah.
Oh, skipped ahead a bit there. Yeah, hi, thanks everyone for really nice seeing a good number and loads of directors here from the CLT, which is good, as well as other people. So yeah, so my name's James Newid, and I'm a co-founder of Your Space. We're the York CLT. And what I'm going to do this evening is, so here to talk about mutual home ownership, I'm very much going to focus it on our interpretation of mutual home ownership. I'm seeing this as a session, well, we're seeing a follow-up session from this, hopefully with questions that come from this, from some of the discussion after I finish speaking. I'm going to try and keep this to 25 minutes, but do keep an eye on that, Helen. Yeah, so there will be definitely opportunities for questions, and so yeah. So in terms of what I'm going to talk about, so I want to introduce like Your Space in York and the context and why we're interested in mutual home ownership, the sort of broad model. What I mean by that is our CLT combining with the Mutual Home Ownership Society model, and then also how we're working with our local authority to lock in affordability, the site, the scheme a little bit, very briefly. I do want to talk about the design. I've got a background in design, but we're not here to talk about that. Also, I'm going to talk a little bit about our share offer, and the reason I'm going to do that in the context and the ownership is that when I go and drill down into a little bit more detail as to how the payments work, it'll make a bit more sense when you see what that money is going off there, in theory. So yeah, I've got like a user journey, like if you're a resident looking to live at Lowfield Green, we'll go through that, talk about some of the problems that hit, some of the things we've considered changing, and then, like I say, lots of opportunities for questions. So in terms of just a very brief bit about me, because I need to move on. So I am a co-founder of Your Space. I'm also a future resident at Lowfield Green, so I've been allocated a home there. I've got a background in architecture and design, but I'm also accredited community-led housing enabler, and I'm working across the UK now. Yeah, so Your Space as an organisation is really willing to share our learning, because loads of people have shared their learning with us. And you know, Lilac for one is a prime example. I'm sure people have heard about that. That's one of the very few that are actually running and working as a mutual home ownership society, and that's the project that inspired us. And we've kind of taken on that mantle to pass on our learning as we've developed our iteration of MHOS. So yeah, that's a little bit of what we're going to try and cover today. In terms of some context, I suppose it's definitely worse in Brighton, but you know, the housing crisis is a national problem. But for York in the north, anyway, it's a bit of an outlier in terms of its affordability issues. And you know, in the last 12 months alone, house prices have gone up 15%. So, and my own personal story as well, as someone who's renting, you know, I had to move house 18 months ago, and I ended up paying 15% more to go and live in that house, and then in the last 12 months it's gone up another 2%. So you know, the sort of buy-to-let market in York is booming, and there's lots of factors affecting that. You know, York's not had a local plan since the 1950s. It's got lots of issues. It's a beautiful historic city with lots of conservation. Lots of housing schemes just haven't been pushed through. So, you know, this is why Your Space came about. And so, you know, there's loads of reasons to why the problem exists. You may, I'm pretty sure you've shown at least one of these films as one of your viewings as Brighton CLT, but in terms of some good films to sort of explore that, why we're in the position that we are in the UK, and this position is that good one of the national picture, you know, and a big problem that we're experiencing is that hangover from the right to buy sale, and this is what we see mutual home ownership is a huge antidote to that. Like there's no way these homes find their way onto the open market, and that's for us a fundamental. Like how can we make homes that are don't find their way into the open market, and that the residents can accrue equity in them. Like I think that's a trick. Like so that's yeah. So you know, it's something that the successive governments haven't resolved. And you know, even most recent government have actually extended its reach right to buy to make it even worse. So we genuinely, you know, we just don't think there are any tenures out there that actually genuinely stop you know, the housing crisis, and we kind of think that mutual home ownership has that potential. So we really hope that the government see this as a potential future tenure when the next time they do their Homes England affordable homes program. So yeah, so and push as well is the film talking about that international problem. And you know, so yeah, like I was saying, a combination of community land trusts, mutual home ownership, we think could really act as a bit of an antidote to that. So that's kind of why we're doing what we're doing. In terms of what our model is, so this is broadly how Your Space works. You know, we sort of pull stakeholders together. We work with the residents to develop plans. We've got long-term aims to create a series of these communities, working with cooperatives, locking land into community ownership, giving cooperatives the right to manage and build their own homes, giving them their own autonomy. And you know, we're an organisation that's kind of powered by the people, you know, people that live in those homes. Like I mentioned, I'm a co-founder of Your Space, and I'm also a future resident at Lowfield Green. So we do encourage people to get involved and push this forward and take hold of their own housing situations. And yeah, like I say, the main aim of us as a CLT is to put land into community ownership and support other people building their own homes. So just to come on to talking about Lowfield Green very briefly, whoops. You know, this particular project, we're taking council-owned land and locking that into community ownership with the CLT, and then we lease that to the co-op, which is where the mutual ownership thing comes in, and that's relevant. We'll come on to a little bit more as to when I go into the detail for that. So that's our model. That's a fancy diagram, and I think it's important to make it clear that we are a people-led organisation. And, you know, we were a group of people that work together. We used to, COVID's obviously thwarted it, share a lot of meals together, lots of tea, lots of Post-it notes. And, you know, we've grown as an organisation. We started out as a small group. We wanted to emulate what Lilac did, and we've grown and taken more people along the way. So, and we like to put these three principles of affordability, sustainability, and community at the heart of what we're doing. So, you know, by coming together as a community, we feel like we can take on those bigger challenges like the housing crisis, like the climate crisis. You know, we've taken those ideas and we've gone quite public with them. We've done a lot of, well, we did a lot of community engagement when we could. Hopefully this year we can do a lot more. You know, we've taken those ideas, we've taken them to the press, we've taken them to radio, all those kind of things, talked about our approach, and we've been generally well received locally for what we're trying to do. And the project we went live with a few years ago, 2015, was called Oliver House. And, you know, we talked about mutual home ownership. We talked about the potential for councils to not sell off their land and buildings to the highest bidder and reserve, you know, reserve land for projects like ours. And although we were unsuccessful with Oliver House, it did get our feet under the table. And this really, this now brings us to the project and talking about Lowfield Green as to how we've evolved it. So, you know, we were unsuccessful with Oliver House, but we did get commitment from the council to find an alternative site for us. And really, this is the only reason we're getting anywhere near our affordability targets, because the council didn't sell this land off to the highest bidder. So in terms of thinking about affordability and locking in that affordability, it's really important that the council are partnering with us, and that's a big strength to what we're trying to do in York. The council have listened to us, even if we did very publicly, we very politely slagged them off. So in terms of what we did, so we didn't have to bid for the site. So the big orange arrow points to where we're trying to build our scheme. It's part of a wider council development. So all those coloured homes are new homes, 165 homes, 19 of which are ours. We're adjacent to some self-build plots. Hopefully you can see my cursor here. And we are basically working towards trying to build the 19 homes. And in terms of our scheme, I'll very briefly talk about the design. So this is like an aerial view of what we're trying to build. We got planning permission back in March 2019. It's a mixture of 1 and 2 bed flats, 2, 3 and 4 bed homes. We're building a co-housing community. So we have a common house, we have shared facilities, which is a financial burden for affordable housing project. Yeah, we've tried to design it around sustainability principles like permaculture and One Planet Living. We have 12 car parking spaces for the 19 homes. We're building from bio-based construction materials. We've designed in rainwater harvesting, renewable energy. We're really thinking carefully about our waste and recycling, composting. So we're trying to build a sustainable community, really, and we're trying to do that affordably. And that is a challenge at times because those two things are at loggerheads to each other. So that's kind of our scheme. And I should say actually as well, so I mentioned about your space, but a key component and the key player in this is Lowfield Green Housing Co-op, which is now an entity. It was formed in 2019 after we received planning permission. And this partnership between Lowfield Green Housing Co-op, your space as the CLT, and City of York Council as the local authority is really behind what we're trying to achieve here and why we've been so successful. And here's just a nice image of the community hub, like we're, you know, the future residents are involved in the design process around this as well, like designing in those opportunities to bump into each other and that sort of social glue. And we want to open this out as a community facility, not just for the residents, but for the wider community. And yeah, we're really, really proud of what we've developed. We're just very, very keen to just get a spade in the ground and start building it now. So in terms of the sort of making the project happen, so we, in order to buy the land at Lowfield Green, we issued community shares in our CLT, which allowed us to borrow money from the community at a lower rate than we could do from a lender. And we ran that campaign on the premise of that idea that most people could afford a mortgage on a house. It's the deposit that's the barrier. So, and lots of people find their way through that barrier with, people don't like the phrase, but the idea of a bank of mum and dad. So we played on that and worked around the idea of the community bank of mum and dad, and how could we get the community to help reduce the deposits that the future residents were paying. So, you know, it allowed us to get that community support, and we had a lot of support anyway. And the way that it worked is that we, as a CLT, we sold shares, which we used to buy the land off City of York Council. And then once the Lowfield Green Mutual Home Ownership Society is up and running, a portion of their monthly repayments goes towards paying off those shareholders. And it ensures that your space has that double asset lock on this land. That land is in community ownership, and then the homes are cooperatively owned. So there's a really nice sort of synergy there between us collectively working with Lowfield Green to keep these homes affordable. I won't go into this too much, but this just kind of shows the money flow, like that, how that share offered is paid off. But basically, there's a 999-year lease between your space and the Mutual Home Ownership Society, and then there's those individual leases. And I said before, those monthly repayments go back to pay it off. Now, kind of focusing a little bit more on what we're really here to talk about. Hopefully that was a good bit of context for where, you know, what we're trying to do in terms of mutual home ownership and how it works. So we like to think of it as somewhere between renting and owning. Like I said, one of the main ethos for what we're trying to do is that these homes don't find their way onto the open market. And what this allows us to do is to do that. And the way that we do that is that when we become residents, and so myself, me and my partner and my baby, we're going to be looking at a 3-bed house. So when we want to move into that property, we actually become resident owners. And well, we don't actually own our house outright, we collectively own those homes with our neighbours. So I become a member of the Mutual Home Ownership Society, in this particular case Lowfield Green Housing Co-op, and Lowfield Green Housing Co-op owns those homes. So it's that idea that, yeah, we collectively own the development with our neighbours rather than individually. In terms of how you accrue your shares, so different from a rental co-op, mutual home ownership allows residents to accrue equity with shares. So similar to how you would accrue equity if you bought a house on the open market, you know, you pay your deposit and then you pay over time your monthly repayments, and then you slowly but surely basically develop and accrue equity. And the amount of equity is a portion to the size of unit that you have. So if you have a 1-bed unit, 1-bed flat, you've got less, you've got the least amount of shares to buy, whereas a 4-bed house has the most amount of shares to buy. So yeah, the shares that you can own are proportionate to the size of property that you have. In terms of leaving or exiting the scheme, so the key difference from standard ownership is that when you leave, you can't sell those shares on the open market. So the co-op has control, and it controls the value of those shares to ensure that they don't rise in value sharply, like standard housing market prices do. So what we do here is like to think about it, that affordability being recycled from one generation to the next. And so yeah, so when you leave, you can't basically sell your shares on the open market. That's very broadly how it works, and I'm really happy to take questions on that. This is the bit that I was saying to Helen, I wasn't sure if this was going to work too well, but I'm going to give it a go. So I'm going to click on this. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Is this coming up?
Yes.
Seamless.
Perfect. I shouldn't have said anything. Shouldn't have said anything. So, right, I'm going to open this out. Who wants to know? 1 bed flat, 2 bed flat, 2 bed house, 3 bed home, 4 bed. Who wants to know? Choose, Helen.
2-bed house.
2 bed house. Let's have a look. So, just so you know, and this is again that ethos of cooperatives and the ethos of people working. This is an amazing piece of work that one of our co-op members did last year when we were trying to communicate how being part of this would work in terms of your scheme. So there's an amazing visual because I'm a very visual person, so I love this. And yeah, so here we go. So these were basically, this is a resident journey for each of the house types that you would at Lowfield Green, and I'm happy to share these as well after the meeting. If so, yeah. So here we go. So this is, again, this is very much our interpretation of mutual ownership. I would always encourage you to go and look at Lilac and there's the standard rules that Wrigley's have with other people, but this is how it works here. So 2 bed house, this sort of resident journey here. So Monica and Dan, they're called here. This is what Hannah went for. So at the time, these figures do need to be updated. The value of the property is £194,767. Now that value represents what it costs to build. There's no developer profit. There's no what it pays, everything it costs minus all the grant. That's how much that house is worth, and that's how much the resident pays. So you pay £2 to become a Your Space member, and you apply for a home at Lowfield Green. Your application is accepted and you're offered a pace, accepted. So Monica and Dan join Lowfield Green Housing Co-op. Now, the way that Lowfield Green Housing Co-op worked, and I mentioned this before, the idea of affordability, sustainability and community, we have these 3 pillars to our stool, and they actually are the title of our working groups as a co-op. So you choose to become a working circle. You have a buddy system. You can come in. You can also be part of a legal team, but no one ever wants to be part of the legal team. So we put that one, on as an outlay. When you sign up to become a co-op, the agreement, you pay a £500 joining fee, which is basically £250 per adult member. So that's both Monica and Dan pay their £250. And then that basically secures them a space in Lowfield Green Housing Co-op. The expectation is that every adult member is putting in 7 hours a month into the project, attending meetings, carrying out tasks. It's just the cooperative expectation that we have. When it comes to moving in, Monica and Dan pay the deposit of their house. Now, we've fixed the deposit at 10% of as the baseline. Interestingly, and this is a point which is what I really like about mutual ownership, these are some of the conversations we've had as a co-op. What if I was looking at a 2 bed house and I have £40,000 deposit? Does that mean that, you know, if let's say Monica and Dan were struggling, could they pay a 7% or an 8%? Like, as long as we collectively meet the 10% minimum, we can do that. And that's something that we like about the model. Like, it's that idea of collective ownership and collective benefit. But we've modeled this on 10%. So you pay your 10% deposit, £19,477. You sign your lease agreement. And then that just describes the relationship there between mutual ownership and Your Space, who owns the freehold of the land. There's the equity agreement. Goes into quite a lot of detail this, but basically there's an agreement when you sign up that you sign a lease and there's a mortgage that's over 40 years that's going to be covered. This is when we were hoping to be on site last summer. Didn't quite happen. We're definitely not going to be in by summer 2022. I'll come on to talk about that. And then you move in. And now this gives a bit of a breakdown of the monthly repayment. So this is how much you would be paying, £798. And I'll sort of talk through some of this and what it goes to. So I mentioned before the relationship between Your Space and Lowfield Green. A portion of that £798 goes towards that loan agreement. Is this too small, by the way? Actually, I just thought this. Can you see this?
Quite
okay?
Small.
Is it? Okay. Well, it's a good job I'm speaking. I'll share it with you afterwards.
Right.
Actually, I'll tell you what, now that I've just said that, let's see if I can just zoom in a little bit, just so you can see it. A bit better. So this is the breakdown. So yeah, so a portion of £115 of the 798 goes towards paying the loan lease agreement, which is between Your Space and Mutual Ownership Society. £555 of the most of it goes off paying the mortgage that we have with the College of Building Society. And then there's ongoing costs. So we've got it's all tied into the monthly repayments. We've got maintenance fee for small damages, and then we build up a fund for our capital replacement fund, and then we've got overhead contributions for things like electricity or the communal facilities. This goes into talk about what happens after Dan and Monica move out after 6 years. So this gives a bit of a breakdown, and I'm happy to talk about this in a bit more detail, probably in the second workshop, but in terms of how much equity they've accrued over that period. So basically it's £17,881, and that the way that's worked out is that they've paid £80,000 in, and which included £19,000 of their deposit, but then they get £35,000. It's basically 43% of what they paid in over the time that they've been there, they get back. So this is why I'm saying it's like that part way between renting and owning. There is a loan to finance that the residents pay for, and so yeah, that's a bit of a breakdown of what they get when they leave. And in terms of new residents moving in, this is the bit that I was trying to explain earlier in terms of how it works. So the new resident pays their 10% of the current value. Now, the way we talked before, about the sorry, someone just tried to speak to me. I was halfway through. So residents moving in, the new residents moving in, and because I was saying about the co-op controlling the value of the units, the value of the properties rise 2% every year, which is akin to inflation. And so after 6 years, that the house value, so 198,000, that's gone up slightly, or 190,000 gone up slightly over that time. So that person comes in, pays their 10% deposit, and then they start the cycle all over again. And what that does is it allows the mutual home ownership to refinance and pay that person out. Now, I appreciate that was there's a lot of information there, but I'm happy to share these afterwards. But I just thought it was useful to sort of see, a bit of a breakdown of how that works in terms of the financing for someone entering the scheme. Just in terms of where we're at, a quick. So we've been trying to. You'll see from that we were hoping to be on site in summer last year. It didn't quite happen. We do feel like we've been in limbo for the last couple of years. Part of our financial model was heavily dependent on the community housing fund, and this is where the health warning comes with mutual home ownership. So we've basically been stalled, and we're very socially distanced in this picture. It looks like we're about to do a flash mob, but we have been stuck for a while now. We have been ready to start for a while. It feels like that. So in terms of and that I know the Brighton CLT team have been involved in this too, and the National CLT network are very involved in this too. It is trying to campaign for that. But currently, mutual home ownership isn't a recognised form of affordable tenure by Homes England. When the Homes England Community Housing Fund was in place and it was going to fund capital funding, we were in the queue to get £855,000 that was going to be basically a third of at the time our build costs, and that was going to make the homes accessible. They were originally looking between 60 and 70% of the local market, really affordable. So we've been really hampered by that, and we've been trying to fill that hole ever since March 2020 when we did an amazing share offer. We raised £420,000 to buy the land, ready to go, just waiting for the government to announce the new community housing fund, which is in their manifesto. Lo and behold, this government didn't do what it said it was going to do, and we've been caught out a little bit. So we're still campaigning and still hopeful that can come through, but basically, yeah, we've had to really consider whether this is the right thing to go forward with until there is actually capital grant funding for it. So so we're still campaigning for that fund to be renewed, as I'm sure most people are. So yeah, we've been a bit thwarted by that. In terms of what we've been trying to do to fix this, well, this was where we were April last year at the Your Space AGM. We were sort of outlining what I've just described there in terms of the community housing fund issue. we've looked at different options, like can we reduce our costs by borrowing money from the Public Works Loan Board from the council? That hasn't quite worked. Can the council provide us alternative funding? The council are broke, so they can't give us any of their Section 106 receipts. And again, there was a question mark over the tenure and whether it was the right thing to do. We've even looked at shared ownership. Can we make shared ownership look like mutual home ownership in order to access Homes England grant? That was a hard lesson. And so like options we've been exploring, like, you know, these were some of the things here, like I won't go into these in too much detail because I'm quite keen for us to be able to have time for questions, but you know, we have looked at different owners, and actually this shared ownership thing is back on the table again because we still haven't been able to resolve the situation that we were in. So yeah, so in terms of where we are, so this was where our house prices were at the very beginning in terms of our targets. So was the green and our current costs. So what this was demonstrating back in April last year was that even without the community housing fund, our homes were still significantly lower than the local market. And although we lost some residents within the co-op, the decision was made last summer to go ahead without the funding and build the homes, and everything rose. So I think our homes were still, they were coming in about 80% of the market. So this was our sort of communication that we weren't going to meet our initial target, but even we were still hopeful of meeting those targets. And again, we were still trying to demonstrate here, and this is again why I showed you that breakdown of all the costs that we're covering. Like when you actually look at mutual home ownership and what we're buying in, we're actually, when you add in the fact that we're paying bills, there's the capital replacement stuff that you don't have, that you would normally just have to pay for out of your own pocket if you owned your own home. We started to do a bit of an analysis to sort of really drive home how mutual home ownership is good value for money, really. And then the key thing for us that we always come back to, which is it gets better with age. Like we've done some really interesting modeling as to like, and this is quite interesting too, as the first generation, the people that put all this time in, the people that are going to be paying the most up front, in the future, these homes are only going to get more and more affordable, because that's to say the market continues in the trajectory that it has. So these were all the things that we were pushing forward last year when we took the decision to crack on without the grant funding. Unfortunately, we have hit another snag in the last 12 months in that we lost our builder. And then I don't know if you've heard about this Brexit thing, but that's absolutely hammered. Like Brexit, the combination of Brexit and COVID, I'll tell you what, those two things weren't in our risk register for our business plan. No one could have planned for that. We found ourselves basically £1 million over budget with our build, like because we had to go back out to tender in the market that's just crazy at the moment. So we are, just to say all the things that I said notwithstanding, like I think it is an amazing model. I think it really disrupts and agitates our connection between housing and money and how we can think about things differently, but thinking things on a community level. But we have found it hard. It isn't grant fundable at the moment. And so there might be different ways. And there are other models that people are looking at that look a little bit like mutual home ownership. And I think I should probably stop there and take questions. Hopefully that was helpful. I'll stop.
Do you want to stop sharing your screen?
Yeah, we'll do.
Yeah, cool.
Right.
Thanks, super helpful. Dave, is that a question?
Well, I put it in the chat. What happens if house prices go down?
It doesn't matter. We're completely insulated from it. Doesn't matter to us. There's and that's like one of the advantages of it. Like we aren't pinned to the market at all. So there's no concept of negative equity within a mutual home ownership society. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Amy.
I just had a question about so I remember when I was looking at the Lilac model previously, one of the things that we found really interesting about it was just that there was stuff that was pegged to people's incomes, and then there was also things around like people who had more or less capital, and like it seemed, they had to just get this balance. And you mentioned this 10%, and you said, if somebody has more than 10%, other people could have less. I had a couple of questions around that. So my first one is there anything in your model that kind of allows for different incomes or like balances out different kind of like wealth situations? And then also my second one was, if people put in more than 10%, for example, do they get more out at the end? Or like, is it just, you know, some people put in more, some people put in less? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, great. Really good questions. Yeah, so the Lilac model, so that's an interesting one. So yeah, the sort of the CDS cooperatives mutual home ownership model, which Lilac were adopted, and that was based on 33% of your income. I don't know if you've been to any. Oh yeah, go for it. Yeah, sorry. Sorry. So yeah, the Lilac model that was adopted was the 33% of income. I don't know if you've ever been to one of their workshops, but by lunchtime, my mind had melted. Like, it's so complicated. Like, and that's not to say it's not a great thing. And I'm very quick to say that what Paul and Tash and Joe and all the other amazing people like that did was create an amazing model. There was a huge amount of complexity within it. We felt because we felt publicly we were being quite challenged by, or it was challenging to communicate what we were doing. We tried to simplify it as much as we could. And ultimately, this is why I was sort of trying to reiterate this at the beginning of the talk, is that for us, we see mutual home ownership as a route to be able to say to people that we can think about housing differently, and as long as the homes don't find their way onto the open market, and that's the critical bit for us, then how you decide to pay it off and who pays what, it's almost up to the co-op. So we, you know, the Lowfield Green co-op, we've opted to go down this route. And that's been very much influenced by the initial resident group there, myself included. But another group might decide to do the 33%, and then they can go and adopt the Lilac model. And I think that, and this is where, and I'm happy to be talked down by this, the one thing that confused me about the Lilac model was that idea that if you had someone on a higher income and they were to leave, would you then almost be you almost be limiting the amount of people? Would you then be on the hunt for someone who's earning the same amount if they were a high earner, you see? And I don't know, that's where I must admit my interpretation of the Lilac model is a bit possibly not as clear as it should be. But that was one thing we were concerned about with creating we were almost forced to be able to choose people on higher incomes to subsidize the whole thing. There's another question in there that you had around if people put more in. So if people put more in, they just pay less a month. So similarly, if you put less in, you pay a bit more a month. But as I was saying before, because the deposit is the barrier, typically, it was another way. We did the share offer to bring the cost down to basically the co-op are borrowing that money off your space at a much lower rate than they are from the from a lender, just as your space are borrowing it from the community much lower than from their lender, sort of thing. So yes, and was there another one in there? I feel like there was.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank
cool.
you.
No problem, Amy.
Claire, you had a question. Can I ask? Sorry, I'm working on a Mac and I'm really dysfunctional with Mac, so I can't actually read what's in the chat. So if people can use the raise hand function, that would be really useful. Claire, what was your question? Are you on mute,
Claire?
Sorry. I was just asking how many people did you get into your co-op, and will you be oversubscribed with residents? So, will your home units, if you finally get them built, and I sincerely hope you do, will you be oversubscribed with residents? Can you fill them with who you've got at the moment?
Yeah, so we're currently about between 13 and 14. I should know this. My partner's involved in the allocation, and we sound like I'm not listening to it. I think we're at 14 at the moment, 14 households. It's an interesting one, because we've had people come and go. Like the pandemic hit people in ways that people weren't expecting, and people had to dip into their deposits, into their savings, which were their deposits, because they lost their jobs. And it's been a really tough 2 years. So we've actually had quite a flux in the last 2 years. It's also been interesting that some of the people that have come into the community during the pandemic, like some people I've been speaking to for 18 months, I don't know how tall they are. I've never seen them. I've just seen them sat at screens. Like, it's really, like, it's kind of it's a difficult time. So we have at one point, I think the most we had was 17. We've interestingly found that the 4 beds there wasn't a big strong uptake on 4 beds, but that's because they were family homes, and we spoke to people like sort of like exit interviews a few times, and the message was, I didn't want to sign it, or people have been interested in them and they thought, well, actually I can't, I've got kids going to school, I need to, the uncertainty around this, like I've been stood up in front of rooms of people saying we're in by Christmas 2019, we're in by Christmas 2020. It's, it feels like it's gone on and on and on. So yeah, so I'm sure once that spade hits the ground, that's when people will start getting back in touch again. But at the minute, it's there's people working on the project, and I think that's a bit of a slog at the minute. Like, you're coming in and working, and it's hard at the moment. It is really hard because we've been struggling for a couple of years trying to get it off the ground. So
yeah, isn't the Community Housing Fund renewal, if it comes, due by the end of March, isn't it, or something?
I certainly hope so. I certainly hope so. If that does, then I can stop all this running around trying to find new ways to solve a problem we've already solved 3 times before. So yeah, that would be great. I hope so, Claire.
I just saw something from the Community Housing Network, CLT Network, that we've written to our MP, and with Theresa May is one of the Maidenhead MPs, so we've written to her and to Adam Afree, who's our Windsor MP, about renewing it, just to try to, put a little bit of pressure from that end. So yeah, I read that it was end of March that Michael Gove has to make a decision. So good luck to you on that. It would help us as well. So let's hope.
Definitely. Thanks, Claire.
Can I ask, I assume that Lowfield Green, the co-op, gets the mortgage.
That's correct. Yeah.
And it's working. What's the percentage? What's the percentage mortgage of the total project that you're having to get out? Because obviously that's one of the issues often, isn't it? That mortgage costs for co-ops are expensive.
Yeah. So what's limiting us on that, and I hope this answers the question. So we're limited. So our deposits, I can't remember what they come to now, because the figures are changing all the time, because it's the price fluctuates and whatever. I think our deposits were coming in at about 200 or 300,000, and then we were borrowing 3.2. I think that makes sense. And then there's the loan lease agreement. Yeah. So I think, what's that as a percentage? Sorry, Helen, I'm going to have to make you do the maths for that.
I'm not sure I can do the maths.
I think it's about 10%. Is it?
300,000 on 3.2 million, roughly.
Yeah, that's
roughly. Yeah. Yes, good. Got that.
And I suppose that's because normally I won't delve too deeply into the mortgage, because normally, like, my experience is that Ecology or whatever will lend kind of 70% at the moment. But I guess you've got the land value in there, which your space owns, and that.
Yeah, and that's the loan. These are good questions. The loan lease agreement there's a premium on the land. So Lowspace is buying the land for £300,000. And then I think the loan lease agreement is about 600,000, and what that does is that goes to paying off. There's a loan, basically. There's a loan lease agreement between, and that goes towards paying off some of the upfront development costs that your space have covered for Lowfield Green before it gets going. And also there's actually, and although we might decide again to try and save money to take this out, but there is a sort of annual £4,000 to £5,000 sort of CCORN funding, that there's a surplus that your space make off that to help keep the CLT ticking along and keep new projects coming in. I think one of those diagrams I showed earlier about the Your Space's ambition to have a series of these communities, the idea is if we could get a few of these going, that we're less reliant on grant funding. We actually, the residents who we house, a portion of their money goes towards helping house other people in the future, which we really liked the idea of. So yeah, that's how it splits, if that answers the question.
Yeah. Has anyone else got their hand up? Any? Down?
I can see Sarah Hart.
Sorry. Yeah, I had a question. Just, do you know of any other examples of this model being used, especially in places where there's very high house prices or very big, large differences between salaries and or like wages and house prices?
It's a tricky. This is the thing. It's a really tough nut to crack. This. So I was looking at. I know that Granby 4 Street's were looking at one point, but from visiting them not too long ago, they opted in the end not to go for mutual ownership. They ended up doing a discount sale situation for those properties on Granby 4 Street. Quaggy, I don't know if you come across those guys. I've got a list of people I could share, Amy. There is a growing network of people interested. I know that Your Space, Lilac, Wrigley Solicitors, a few other people got together a few years ago. We've been so swamped with trying to solve this problem. We haven't given a huge amount of time, I must admit, in the last 12 to 18 months. Also, all our community's been having babies, so we've all been a bit distracted by that too. So, but we would like to pick that up again and see if there is a network. Someone did reach out to us recently. I think it was Quaggy again. I can't remember where they're based. I think they might be down in Bristol, I think. But there's a few different people looking at it. But like I say, there's also people looking at different models, where I know one model that Catalyst Collective were talking to me about, which was where you have a rental co-op, and then part of your monthly repayments is actually above what it needs to be to cover the rent. So you almost like make a saving, and it emulated the MHOS model in that you were paying off a certain amount, but then when you left, there was this savings pot that you built up, and then you left with that. So that did involve becoming a registered provider, though, which is something that we've not explored yet, in order to access the capital grant to make the homes affordable. Because that's the trick, really, bringing in the capital grant to make the homes affordable now. The homes will get affordable over time. It's this first generation that are getting hammered by the fact that some of us have been spending 7 years trying to get this off the ground. 4, 5, 6 years. There's and the fact that we are going to be paying the most over time as well, because once the mortgage is paid off, then everything, the amount that you actually get back gets more too. So it's it's an interesting financial conundrum.
Lizzie.
Well, I think you're on mute, Lizzie.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask a bit more about the community element and the people that are already involved and how that's working out in terms of relationships and arguments and that sort of thing, if it's going well, really. I mean, because it seems like you've been a bit through the ringer, and given that it might be problematic, I don't know.
It's it hasn't been a great 2 years, really. 2 years, it's gone fast. I think because I talked about this before, and it depends when I split my hat. I've got a Your Space hat and I've got a Lowfield Green hat. If I was just wholly wearing a Your Space hat and I had that sort of maybe a developer or a housing association mentality, we would have just gone to the residents. Oh, sorry, that funding's not coming in. It just costs this much now. And 70% of the residents would have left, or 90% or whatever. So we're trying to bring a sense of kindness to how you deal with these issues, and I think it has been tough. Especially, there's been some really key people who've left. It's the churn of people that's been the main problem, because it does get you down when especially if you see people leave, and then and you can't begrudge them this too. Like, people have come into some money and they've got money for a deposit, and then they move on and stuff. I fear the most disagreement. I mean, we work on this. So in terms of how we communicate as a community group, we use sociocracy principles in terms of how we make sure that people get heard.
Yeah,
we try to.
I wondered if it was something like that. That's really good to know.
Because I mentioned those working circles, the affordability, sustainability community, and then there's a hub. We've actually disbanded those to bring people in together. So actually, this is a way that because we've acknowledged that this has been a tough time for people, we've actually disbanded the smaller groups, and got everyone together. And we've actually had some really good online meetings, and we've started to do more in-person ones now. I think the main struggle has been for us the last 2 years is not actually being able to be in a room together. We used to share food together. We used to go to the pub after meetings. We used to be friends, and now it just feels like we just stare at each other down computer screens and get exasperated in our bedrooms. And I think that's the tricky thing. But it's ultimately a huge social experiment. Like this isn't even the difficult bit yet. We're not living next door to each other, and our dogs aren't annoying each other, and we're not playing our music too loud yet. We're not even got to that bit yet. We're just trying to make the homes happen. So we are thinking about, we've done non-violent communication. We try and create an ethos that we have a community team that are looking out for people as a buddy system. It's that kind of
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you.
no problem.
Sarah, hi Sarah.
Hi Helen.
Hi Sarah.
Yeah, hi James. I'll probably see you Saturday, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think you will.
I think I'll be enticed by cake. Anyway, I've just been thinking in this last week about the co-op movement, and I heard something on a hub meeting last Thursday, and there's a lot of money out there with co-ops. Now, really, if co-ops in the past have received quite high grant funding, is there an opportunity for those existing co-ops to help other mutual home ownership or other co-ops out in terms of the loan stock? But do you think they should be thinking about grants in terms of 0% return on that funding? I heard there was 2 billion out there.
I've heard
Have you heard that as well?
All kinds of figures that are around. I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I don't think it's for me to say what co-ops should do with their money, and ultimately those co-ops
not at all. But it's just
member, that ultimately they exist for their members, and I think that
of course,
that I do understand there is a lot of money swimming about in co-ops that have paid off their mortgages and been accruing rent and stuff. But I don't know. I guess that's probably a question for CCH and. How can we mobilize that? I think that it will be great to think that because let's face it, that the generation of community-led housing now, it's just rebranded, isn't it? This is the co-op movement that was in the 80s and 90s. Like, I think it's come round again, and I think it'd be great to think that past generation could help this generation. But ultimately, the government needs to step in and make this just it's just a pilot at the end of the day, isn't it? We just want a bit of money to make our pilot work. And show that it works,
and demonstrate.
Show that it makes things better. And but it's I mean, a 0% loan from someone would be great, but actually a grant would be better.
Yeah, definitely. I hear you.
Sarah.
Another Sarah, just on Sarah's question, I know I was very involved in Radical Roots a few years ago, and they're definitely working on models of wealthy, long-established co-ops supporting new co-ops in their area. Cornerstone in Leeds are an example of that, and they've looked at various models. I don't know whether they're kind of direct models of just buddying up with one co-op. I think other models were being looked at making a sort of collective group, but yes, there's been lots of discussion, and I think people realise, well, I hope people realise that the privilege that co-op members hold after being in a co-op for a long period of time, obviously they have to fix their roof and things like that, but I think there are a lot of wealthy co-ops out there. I agree. That's all I wanted to say, really. People are looking into it.
Yeah, I believe so. I know someone who is, and I messaged him the other day, I think quite late at night, and said, how much was it you thought the co-ops had? Have you had a beer, James? Yes, I have had a beer, yes.
Martin.
Hello. Yeah, I just thought I'd better say something as a board member of CCH. That there is a lot of money sitting out there, and it is one of the questions that's always going around, and it's something that a lot of co-ops do on their own, right? The loan stock raises, and it's been a bit piecemeal, and it's quite difficult. It's a lot of work. It's quite an onerous thing. There have been a lot of ideas that have been floated around the network over the years about how it could be done. Radical Roots started the rootstock, for example. That was their way of doing it. But there is a piece of research that's going on at the moment that CCH and UK co-housing have put in money together to fund, which is a way of looking at what kind of vehicle could be used to do that, to kind of centralize that process so it becomes a lot easier and kind of tries to come over the risk aversion that some co-ops have. But it's in process, but it's something there is no simple solution to it, but it's finding a way that you can mobilize enough co-ops to invest in something that doesn't become a bank and then become a victim of its own success and have to charge massive rates and stuff like that. But something that's a bit above matchmaking, something that is a vehicle, and that's the research that's going on at the moment. So it's going to take a while, but hopefully it will come to something. It's got some good people on it anyway.
Because it's interesting, because it'd be interesting to see what does come of that. But as someone who's about to launch the retrofit cooperative retrofit program, it'd be great for them to invest that money in the retrofit of all those old properties that are underperforming. And so, from a climate crisis perspective, it feels like that should be prioritized, even though I'm a person who's currently suffering from the housing crisis as well. It's funny, isn't it? Like, it worries me that the systems aren't in place in this country. The government doesn't back these things, so that there becomes almost those difficult conversations that you have, like, what do you choose, climate or the housing crisis?
Can I ask one more question? It's kind of
loads of questions.
I can ask loads of questions. Excellent. I wondered, I still can't get my head around the finances, but I'm not asking you to explain the finances, because I understand that it's a really big question. But I just wondered how did you, as your space or Lowfield Green, what was the process by which you got your head around the finances? Like, what did you do?
Pay consultants loads of money. No, we didn't.
Develop a system.
We did a bit of that. It was interesting. We have some really intelligent people in our team, not me, who are really good with numbers. We've got lots of scientists in our team. We've got scientists in our team, people that are interested. But we have worked. So in terms of actually developing the model, and Sue Bird actually should be here taking the credit, my co-founder of Your Space. Sue did a huge amount of work in developing that business plan and share offer. We actually ended up having to write 2 business plans, because there's one for the co-op and there's one for Your Space, as well as a share offer document, to how it all tallied up. We worked very closely with Andy Woodcock. I think he's still called Andy Woodcock. I've got a horrible feeling he's changed his name to something silly recently. But Andy and Gautier Guerin, and they work with Catalyst Collective. So I mentioned them earlier, Catalyst Collective. They helped develop the financial model. There were periods at which I remember being in Wrigley's offices in Leeds, thinking the whole concept of a CLT linking to a mutual ownership was dead in the water. We had a real issue around stamp duty, land tax, and corporation tax. And it's interesting, actually, that's why we've done the model that we have. This is why Your Space isn't the one taking out the development loan, doing the homes and then handing them over, because we would have been absolutely hammered for stamp duty, land tax on that, because we'd be getting charged the value of the homes rather than just the land. So we got some good advice through the process. So we worked with Wrigley's solicitors really carefully. Jim Reed has been a huge part of this too. Jim Reed, who was involved in Lilac, amazingly busy, but amazingly useful person to have in your team. He understands a lot about housing delivery and financial models and viability, and we did get a good group of people around us, and all those people would be willing to give their time to help as well. I think it's we were quite fortunate when we did the share offer that we accessed the Community Shares Booster program, and that allowed us to pay for some business consultancy and some financial modeling. And there's a whole host of people. It's interesting, these questions are actually starting to think. We said we'd do a follow-up session. I could start to map out what we could what we could dive a little bit deeper in if we wanted to with stuff, and maybe consider asking if some of those people might be interested to come along to map things out.
That sounds good. Are there any? I'm aware of the time now, so I'll just ask if anyone has any final questions. Lots of comments in the chat about how great it's been, James. Super interesting. And as James said, we did plan this as part of a follow-up session. So after this, what I'm going to do is I'll send out the slides and a link to the recording. I've made a note of people who are here. If you are already members of us, I'll have your contact details. If you're not already a member of us and have found out some other way, join us, and then I'll send it to you through part of that. If anyone has anything maybe that they would specifically like that second session to cover, drop me an email, and otherwise we can start to think about where that will go. And I think it will be in about probably been about 3 weeks, a month. I'm looking at James. We'll send it. It won't be next week, but we'll send a date. Does that all sound all right to everyone?
Yeah, I think I would encourage to ask any questions as well, because like it is, I mean, I joked about it before going to the Lilac. I did go for one of those learning from Lilac days, which I'd encourage some people to go to actually. Like figures haven't always been my friend, and numbers, and I think that my mind did melt a little bit by lunchtime, but once I got the concept, because it's so embedded in us, isn't it, this idea of buying a house and rising in profit and the mortgage and all that stuff. So there are some really sort of fundamental, oh, okay, yeah, we need to think about these things differently. So there are loads of questions that it strikes up. So I'm happy to answer them as best I can. But as I alluded to, I might not always be the best person, and that's where I can pull in my support from the rest of the Your Space team and other people around me.
Yeah, brilliant. So if people do have questions afterwards, yeah, as I say, send it, because then we can think about how best to answer them in the next one. Brilliant. Great. James, thanks so much.
No problem.
And lovely to see you. And everybody, yeah, thanks so much for coming. It was great to see so many people here and interested. Hopefully we'll get a mutual home ownership project going in Brighton.
Yeah, we'd love to see that.
Yeah, I think all of us very much so.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thanks both.
Take care, everyone.
And James. Thank you.